Hi everyone, I'm Nadia, and in today's video I'm going to be sharing 10 resin tips for beginners. The very first thing I want to touch on is to make sure that you have the proper safety equipment. This includes a respirator mask, nitrile gloves, and a well-ventilated area. I use a full face respirator mask so that my eyes are covered, and I do recommend a full face respirator mask over the mask that just covers your mouth because you do want to be protecting your eyes as well. Even if your resin states that it's non-toxic, I would still recommend always wearing a respirator mask, especially while you're heating up the resin, and this could be with a torch gun or with a heat gun, because when high temperatures meet resin, it does cause toxic fumes to be released. If you're working in a small room, it's very important that you keep a window open while you are working, and also when you're done working to allow the space to air out. Or you also might want to consider investing in an air purifier. It's also important to make sure that you are wearing 100% nitrile gloves, not just any random pair of gloves. The second tip is to always read the instructions on your resin bottle. Every resin differs, and not every resin has the same mixing ratio, work time, or cure time. For example, if I'm using craft resin, they have a 1:1 ratio by volume, and that's another factor that you need to pay attention to is if your resin goes by volume or weight. If it goes by weight, you'll need a small kitchen scale to measure your part A and part B. You always want to make sure to follow the instructions carefully when it comes to mixing, otherwise your resin might not cure properly, and that can be very frustrating. My third tip is to work on a level space, and I always like to check that my space is level before I start working on a project, just in case if something randomly changed throughout the night, but it's always better to be safe than sorry because resin is self-leveling, so if you're working on a space that is not level, your resin piece won't be level either. Next is to always be mindful of the temperature of your workspace. Resin can cure faster or slower depending on the temperature of the room. The ideal temperature to work in with resin is around 22 degrees Celsius, and if it's too hot in the room, your resin will heat up faster, which could also split your work time in half. So whenever you notice that the temperatures have risen in your room and you want to work with resin, you might have to either turn on the air conditioning or be really fast with your project. Cold temperatures can also cause some issues in your resin, and if it's too cold, it could cause them not to cure properly, or it could just take longer than usual to cure. My fifth tip is to mix your resin slowly and thoroughly, and then mix again. What I mean by this is I will usually pour my part A and part B into 1 cup, and I mix it for several minutes until I can no longer see streaks in the resin. You can also mix slowly to minimize the amount of air bubbles in your resin. The faster you mix, the more air gets trapped, causing those air bubbles. So after I've mixed into 1 cup, I always like to transfer that resin into another cup and mix again to be extra sure that it's mixed thoroughly. And this is mainly because while you're mixing in that first cup, that bottom area of the cup usually doesn't get mixed very well, which can cause some imperfections in your piece. It'll either cause streaks or cause your resin piece not to harden properly. So whenever I'm mixing my resin, I like to pay attention that I'm scraping the sides of the cup and also scraping the bottom of the cup. My sixth tip is to not be afraid to make a mess. Resin can be very messy and very sticky, especially when it's coming towards the end of its work time. So if you are working with resin or you're thinking about starting working with resin, just be prepared to get a little messy. And because of this mess, you'll want to pay extra attention to protect your workspace. I love to use baking paper on my working table because resin can easily be lifted off of it the next day. So it makes cleanup very easy and it can be reused. You also want to wear some clothes that you don't mind ruining. I have learned this lesson the hard way. I have gotten resin on a few leggings that I like, and once the resin is on, that's just the end. There's really no going back. You can't fix it. It'll leave a permanent mark on it. So now I have designated resin clothes, and I don't really care if I get some resin on them. And you should also consider protecting your floors if there's a chance that the resin could leak off of your table onto your floors. My next tip is to have something to pop air bubbles. This could be a torch gun, a heat gun, or there's even spray that can pop bubbles as well. I haven't tried that spray, but I prefer using my torch gun. The only thing with a torch gun is that you do need to be careful while you're using it. You want to move it very quickly so that you don't burn your resin, which can cause yellow marks in your resin, and you don't burn your molds, which could cause your mold to get stuck to your resin. And we're back. My 8th tip is to always have small molds on hand to use with leftover resin. It's very rarely that I'll measure the exact amount of resin that I need for a project, so I'll usually have a little bit of leftover, and instead of just letting that leftover go to waste in the cup. And we're back again. I'm scared this is gonna keep on happening, so I might... It did indeed keep on happening. So instead of letting that cure in the cup and go to waste, I like to pour it into little molds. My favorite are these little heart trinket dishes, and when I get a sale on Etsy, I'll include that as a little gift. My 9th piece of advice is to always cover your resin piece once you're done working. This will help to prevent any small particles or dust, fibers, little hairs to get into your resin piece while it is curing. This can be very annoying when you've been working hard on your pour and you come back the next day to find it covered in dust or to find a little hair on it. We have definitely had our fair share of that, so we always cover it with something to prevent that from happening. And this also goes back to the air purifier, which is another good way to prevent little particles or fibers getting into your piece and keeping your air as clean as possible. My 10th tip is to sand your resin piece if too much time has gone by from your initial layer to your next pour. So typically it's recommended to do a second pour as soon as possible, the next day or even the day after. But if a week or more has gone by from when you need to do another pour on your resin piece, I would recommend sanding it just to ensure that those 2 layers of resin bond together. And bonus tip number 11 is to subscribe to my YouTube channel so you don't miss out on any tutorials. Also check out my Patreon page if you'd like some exclusive content behind the scenes or answers to any resin questions that you might have. And I've made a similar video to this with my mom. I need to check how long ago that was. 2 years ago. So I've made a similar video with my mom 2 years ago. I can't believe it's been 2 years, but I'll leave it linked above here if you want to check it out and see me and my mom. Thank you guys so much for all of your support. Every like and comment really means a lot to us. And I know all of my videos are usually just showing my hands and working on these resin projects, but I would like to upload more videos where you guys can actually see my face and connect the hands to the face, I guess. Let me know if you guys enjoy this type of content. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, subscribe to see more videos like this in the future. Follow me on my Instagram, Summer Girl Designs, and my mom's Instagram, Wild Heart Resin Art. Bye.